In London, every woman wanted the Duke, except the one who had a reason not to. The chandeliers of Whitmore Hall blazed like captured constellations, scattering gold across silk gowns and polished marble as Duke Sebastian Hale entered to the hush of 100 measured breaths. At 6'2", broad-shouldered and impeccably composed, he moved through the ballroom as if it belonged to him, as if the city itself beat in time with his stride. And the women nearest the dais angled their fans and smiles to catch his attention like moths courting a flame. But at the edge of the crowd, near a column veined with pale stone, Claire Monroe did not look up. She stood still, gloved fingers resting over the clasp of a small leather reticule that held a sealed letter she had carried for nearly 500 miles by rail and carriage, through cold dawn platforms and smoke-choked depots, a letter that could stain a family crest or cleanse it, depending on how truth chose to unfold. She had not come to London to be dazzled by titles or trapped by waltzes. She had come to read ledgers, to follow signatures, to measure the distance between rumor and ruin. And when a bright-voiced socialite with diamonds at her throat laughed and said, "Miss Monroe, surely even you cannot resist his grace," Claire answered without heat, without tremor, "I don't pursue what does not belong to me." And the laughter sharpened, curious and cruel in equal measure, because indifference was an insult this room had never learned to forgive. Across the marble expanse, Sebastian felt it before. He understood it, the absence of hunger in a sea of want. His gaze lifting, searching, finding her face not turned toward him but away, as if the Duke of Blackthorn were merely another gentleman in a city of too many. And something old and guarded inside him shifted, not wounded pride but awakened interest. The orchestra swelled into a waltz measured in 3 steady beats, skirts began to circle like clockwork, and a whisper passed from ear to ear that Claire Monroe must be pretending, must be angling for attention by refusing to angle at all, because no woman in London would decline the Duke unless she were foolish or dangerous. A steward approached her with polite suspicion, a question hovering about invitations and propriety, and Claire's chin lifted by a fraction of an inch, not defiant, not pleading, simply certain. She did not know that Sebastian had already begun to move, that he had watched the steward's posture and read the room's appetite for spectacle, that he understood humiliation as a sport among the well-fed. She only knew that she would not bend. The steward opened his mouth, the laughter swelled again, and then a voice cut through the music, low and unhurried. "She is with me." And the sound of it changed the air itself, turning curiosity into silence. Claire turned at last, meeting eyes the color of winter steel, and in that suspended second the city held its breath, because the Duke had never claimed what did not reach for him. And for the first time in his life, he had found a woman who did not reach at all. The music did not resume immediately. It lingered in uncertainty, bows hovering above strings, as if even the orchestra feared choosing the wrong side. Claire felt every gaze settle upon her shoulders like falling ash, warm and suffocating, yet she did not look away from Sebastian Hale. Up close, he was not merely handsome. He was controlled. His dark hair was brushed back with deliberate precision, his midnight coat cut to fit a frame built by discipline rather than indulgence. But it was his eyes that unsettled her most. They did not burn with charm. They calculated. "You are with me," he repeated, not loudly, yet the words carried to the vaulted ceiling and back again. The steward bowed at once. The whispering stilled. Claire inclined her head slightly. "Your Grace," she said, her tone measured, neither grateful nor flustered. A faint murmur rippled through the crowd. Gratitude was expected. Relief was expected. She offered neither. Sebastian studied her, as though she were a document written in a cipher he intended to solve. "You do not appear surprised," he observed. "I was not aware I required rescue," she replied. A flicker of something crossed his expression. Not anger. Interest. The orchestra resumed, softer now, the waltz unfolding in 3 steady counts. He extended his hand. It was a simple gesture. It felt like a declaration. "Dance with me, Miss Monroe." It was not phrased as a command. It was not quite a request. Around them, silk rustled and diamonds caught the light, every woman in the room aware that the moment they had rehearsed in dreams was being handed to someone who had not even asked for it. Claire looked at his hand for the briefest second. His gloves were immaculate. His patience was not. "If I refuse?" she asked quietly. His voice lowered. Then London will assume you fear me. A dangerous answer. Honest. Claire placed her hand in his. The contact was brief, proper, the space between them measured to the inch as they moved into the pattern of the dance. The room exhaled. They circled once, twice. His hand rested at her waist with formal distance. Her gaze did not soften. You have caused quite a disturbance, he said. By existing, she asked. A corner of his mouth almost lifted. By declining what others consider fortune. Claire met his eyes fully now. Fortune for whom? The question hung between them like a blade wrapped in silk. Sebastian did not look away. You assume too much. I assume nothing, she answered. That is precisely why it unsettles you. The dance tightened, the turn bringing her closer for a fraction of a second before distance returned. He could feel it then. She was not intimidated. She was not impressed. And she was not seeking anything from him. That alone made her the rarest presence in the room. Why are you truly here, Miss Monroe? He asked, his tone softer now, threaded with curiosity instead of command. Claire's fingers brushed the small reticule at her wrist, where paper and ink held more weight than diamonds ever could. Not for you, she said calmly. The music swelled toward its final cadence. The last turn slowed. Around them, London watched for a crack in her composure, a blush, a tremor, any sign that the Duke's orbit had pulled her in. Instead, when the final note fell, Claire stepped back with perfect grace and released his hand first. And for the first time in years, Sebastian Hale felt something unfamiliar settle beneath his composed exterior. Not rejection, not defeat, anticipation. The applause came a second too late, brittle and polite, as if London had forgotten how to react when a spectacle refused to follow its script. Claire felt the space he had occupied linger like the faint warmth left behind by a candle just extinguished. She did not look back at him. That, more than anything, unsettled the room. A pair of ladies near. The refreshment table leaned closer together, their fans moving in precise rhythm. Bold, one whispered. Reckless, the other corrected. Claire crossed the marble floor with measured steps, her posture neither hurried nor proud, simply steady. She could feel his gaze follow her, not possessive, not offended, but intent. Intent was more dangerous than anger. At the far edge of the ballroom, beneath a tall window framed by velvet drapes, Madeline Cross waited with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Diamonds glittered at her throat like frost. Miss Monroe, she said sweetly, how fortunate you are. His Grace rarely dances twice in one evening, yet he seemed intrigued. Claire folded her gloved hands before her. Intrigue fades, she replied calmly. Reputation remains. Madeline's smile sharpened. Reputation is fragile in this city, especially for women who arrive without introduction and presume to decline what others cherish. The words were silk wrapped around a warning. Claire felt the weight of the reticule at her wrist, the sealed letter within pressing faintly against the leather, a reminder of why she had crossed 500 miles to stand beneath these chandeliers. I presume nothing, she said softly. I simply observe. Across the room, Sebastian accepted congratulations he did not hear. Men clapped him on the shoulder. Women laughed too brightly. Yet his attention remained fixed on the pale figure by the window. She did not glow beneath the lights. She did not perform for admiration. She stood like a quiet question mark in a city built on exclamation points. He disliked questions he could not answer. Who is she? He asked his steward without turning his head. Claire Monroe, Your Grace. Recently arrived. Companion to Mrs. Abernathy of Westbrook Square. Sebastian nodded once. Westbrook Square. Modest, respectable, unremarkable. Nothing about that address explained the steadiness in her gaze. Nothing about her position explained the absence of ambition. Find out why she is here, he said quietly. Not as a threat. As a necessity. Near the window, Madeline's tone softened further. One must be careful, Miss Monroe. London does not forgive women who mistake opportunity for power. Claire met her eyes without flinching. And men, she asked, do they forgive themselves? The question landed cleanly. For a fraction of a second, Madeline's composure cracked before reforming into polite disdain. Enjoy your evening, she said coolly. Claire inclined her head. She did not enjoy it. She endured it. Beyond the glass, carriage wheels rolled over cobblestone, the sound distant yet grounding. She had not come to win a duke. She had come for ink, for signatures, for the truth hidden in columns of numbers. But as she turned slightly, just enough to confirm what she already sensed, she saw him still watching her from across the ballroom. Not with flirtation, not with triumph, with calculation. And somewhere beneath that measured exterior, something else had begun to form. Not desire. Not yet. Recognition. The waltz ended, but the silence it left behind did not. It followed Claire Monroe as she moved away from the window and toward the corridor leading to the terrace, each step deliberate, each breath measured. She needed air, not because she was shaken, but because the room had begun to close in with expectation. Outside, the night stretched cool and clear over London, carriage lanterns flickering like distant embers along the street below. The terrace doors whispered shut behind her, muting the orchestra to a faint pulse beneath the glass. For the first time since she arrived, she allowed her shoulders to lower by half an inch. She had navigated the first test. Barely. Footsteps approached, unhurried. She did not turn. "You leave as if you have won something," Sebastian said quietly. The night did not swallow his voice. It carried it. Claire rested her gloved hands against the stone balustrade. "Have I?" she asked. "London seems to think so." He stepped beside her, maintaining a respectable distance of perhaps 18 inches, close enough that she could sense the warmth beneath his tailored coat, far enough to remain proper. "London believes many things," he replied. "Most of them are inaccurate." She glanced at him then, studying the clean line of his profile against the glow of the ballroom behind him. "And what do you believe, Your Grace?" He considered her for a moment longer than necessary. "I believe you did not come here for admiration." The statement was not a question. Claire's fingers tightened slightly around the clasp of her reticule. Inside, the sealed letter seemed heavier than it had an hour ago. "Admiration fades," she said evenly. "Influence remains." A faint breeze lifted a strand of her hair, catching it against her cheek. Sebastian noticed. He noticed everything. "You speak like someone accustomed to numbers," he observed. "Columns. Calculations." She did not confirm it. She did not deny it. Instead she asked, "And you speak like someone accustomed to control." A subtle shift in his posture betrayed the truth of it. "Control is necessary," he said, "especially when one's name carries weight." Claire turned fully toward him now, the distance between them narrowing by inches rather than steps. "Weight can crush," she said softly, "even those who carry it." The words lingered between them, no longer sharp, but not gentle either. Sebastian's gaze darkened, not with offense, but with recognition. She was not impressed by the title. She was measuring the man. "You are not what I expected," he said at last. "Nor are you," she replied. A carriage rolled below, wheels grinding softly over cobblestone, the sound grounding the moment. Inside the ballroom, laughter rose again, brittle and bright. Here, beneath the open sky, the air felt clearer. "Tell me why you are in London, Miss Monroe," he said, his tone steady, almost reasonable. Claire's eyes held his. "Tell me why you wish to know." The answer formed behind his composure, unspoken but undeniable. Because she had unsettled him. Because she had not reached for him. Because she had looked at him not as a prize, but as a possibility. He did not say any of that. Instead he said, "Because I do not enjoy mysteries." Claire allowed herself the faintest trace of a smile. "Then perhaps, Your Grace, you should learn to." And for the first time that evening, it was not the ballroom watching them. It was the night itself, quiet and waiting, as if aware that something far more significant than a dance had just begun. The night air cooled, but the tension did not. Claire felt at the moment the terrace doors opened again, and laughter spilled outward like perfume too heavy for the room. Madeline Cross stepped onto the stone tiles with calculated grace, a silk shawl draped over her shoulders as though she had simply wandered out for air. She paused when she saw them standing apart, though not far apart enough. "Your Grace," she said lightly, her gaze flicking to Claire before returning to him. "The Countess was asking after you. It would be unwise to keep her waiting." Sebastian did not move immediately. "The Countess is rarely kept waiting," he replied, his tone even. Madeline's eyes sharpened, but her smile remained flawless. "Some of us understand how fragile impressions can be." Claire recognized the warning beneath the civility. Impressions, reputation, narrative. In London, those mattered more than truth. "I would not wish to disrupt your evening," Claire said calmly, stepping back from the balustrade. "Nor would I," Madeline answered smoothly. "Disruption can be costly." Sebastian's gaze shifted between them, observing the exchange not as a man offended, but as one assembling pieces of a larger pattern. He could sense it now. This was no simple rivalry of attention. It was positioning. Claire inclined her head slightly toward him. "Thank you for the dance, Your Grace." The words were proper. Nothing more. She turned toward the doors before either of them could respond. Inside, the ballroom seemed louder than before, as though the brief quiet of the terrace had sharpened her awareness. Conversations resumed with new energy, and more than one pair of eyes followed her return. She moved through the crowd with steady composure until she reached Mrs. Abernathy, who sat near the edge of the dance floor fanning herself. "You have attracted considerable attention," the older woman murmured without looking up. Attention is rarely accidental. Claire met her employer's gaze. Nor is it always welcome. Across the room, Sebastian had not yet rejoined the dancers. He stood where she had left him, Madeline speaking beside him with soft urgency. He listened, but not entirely. His focus drifted again, returning to Claire as though compelled by something he could not yet name. Madeline leaned closer. "She is not suitable company," she said quietly. "No background. No alliances. No advantage." Sebastian's expression did not change. "That depends," he replied. "On what?" Madeline asked. His answer came without hesitation. "On what she wants." The music swelled into another waltz, but he did not move toward the dance floor. Instead, he signaled discreetly to his steward at the far end of the hall. Instructions were given with a subtle nod. Not dramatic, not public, simply deliberate. Claire felt the shift before she understood it. A servant approached Mrs. Abernathy with a respectful bow. "His Grace requests the pleasure of Miss Monroe's presence at Blackthorn House tomorrow afternoon," he said. "Regarding a matter of administrative consultation." Administrative consultation. The phrase was precise. Respectable. Impossible to decline without consequence. Mrs. Abernathy blinked in surprise. Claire's fingers tightened slightly around her reticule. So this was how he would proceed. Not through flirtation. Through inquiry. Through proximity disguised as purpose. She lifted her chin. "Please inform His Grace," she said evenly, "that I will attend." Across the ballroom, Sebastian watched her response. No blush. No visible triumph. Only resolve. The game had shifted, and for the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar stir beneath his control. Not possession. Not pride. Curiosity sharpened into intent. Blackthorn House did not welcome visitors. It assessed them. The following afternoon, Claire Monroe stood at the base of its broad limestone steps, her gloved hands still, her spine straight, as iron gates closed behind the carriage that had delivered her precisely at 2 o'clock. The mansion rose 4 stories against a pale London sky, windows tall and watchful, the black iron balcony railings sharp against the cream stone. Nothing about it suggested warmth. Everything suggested order. A footman led her through a corridor lined with oil portraits and into a study where tall shelves of ledgers replaced decorative art. Sunlight filtered through long windows, catching the dust in narrow beams. Duke Sebastian Hale stood near a mahogany desk wide enough to command a courtroom. He did not approach immediately. He observed. "Miss Monroe," he said at last, his tone even, neither cordial nor cold. "You arrived precisely on time." "You requested it," she replied. He gestured toward the desk. "Please." On its surface lay several open ledgers, columns of numbers marching in disciplined rows across cream paper. Beside them rested a silver letter opener and a stack of correspondence bound with dark ribbon. Claire's pulse remained steady. "You wish to consult me regarding administrative matters," she said. "I was told you possess an aptitude for financial review," Sebastian answered. "Mrs. Abernathy spoke highly of your attention to detail." A faint truth. Claire had assisted with accounts before. She stepped closer, maintaining proper distance. "What specifically requires review?" He watched her rather than the books. "Several investments managed under my family name," he said. "I prefer clarity over assumption." She removed her gloves with measured precision and set them aside. The act was simple. It felt like crossing an invisible line. Her fingers brushed the edge of a ledger. The paper was thick, the ink deliberate. She began to read. The columns reflected land holdings, shipping ventures, philanthropic trusts. On the surface, immaculate. But as her eyes moved down the page, subtle discrepancies emerged. Transfers routed through subsidiary names. Interest adjustments calculated to the fraction of a percent. Her breathing slowed. She recognized the pattern. Not immediately incriminating. Merely complex. This structure benefits someone beyond the primary estate, she said quietly. Sebastian's gaze sharpened. Go on. The redirection here. She indicated a line with the tip of her finger, careful not to smudge the ink, creates insulation. If losses occur, they do not appear directly tied to you. Silence stretched between them. Outside, carriage wheels rolled faintly along the avenue. And if gains occur? He asked. Claire did not look up. Then they appeared generous. She turned a page. The name of a secondary trust surfaced. Her throat tightened by a fraction. It was familiar. She had seen it once before, months ago, in a ledger far less polished, in a house where the curtains had remained drawn even at noon. Her father's handwriting had trembled over similar columns. She closed the book gently. Who oversees these transfers? She asked. My senior advisor, Sebastian replied. For the past 7 years. 7 years. The numbers settled heavily. Claire met his eyes now. And you have never questioned them? His jaw tightened slightly. I question everything. Not everything, she said softly. The words were not accusation. They were observation. He held her gaze without flinching. For the first time, something shifted beneath his composure. Not suspicion of her. Suspicion of his own foundation. You recognize something, he said. Claire placed her gloves back on, concealing the slight tremor that had begun in her fingers. I recognize patterns, she answered. Patterns reveal intention. He stepped closer, reducing the space between them to less than a foot. Not imposing. Intent. And what is the intention here, Miss Monroe? Claire's voice did not waver. That depends, she said evenly, on who truly benefits from your name. And in the quiet that followed, the weight of that question settled across the study like a verdict waiting to be read. The silence in the study did not feel empty. It felt alive. Sebastian did not step back when Claire finished speaking. If anything, he stood straighter, as though the accusation she had not voiced had given him something sharper than offense. You are suggesting my name has been used without my full awareness, he said evenly. It was not disbelief. It was calculation. Claire held his gaze without hesitation. I am suggesting that complexity often hides convenience, she replied. And convenience favors someone. The clock on the mantel ticked once, twice, steady as a heartbeat. Sebastian turned slightly, reaching for another ledger from the stack. Show me, he said. Not defensive, demanding clarity. Claire moved beside him, careful to maintain proper distance. She opened the book to a mid-year quarter and traced the columns with a precise fingertip. Here, she said quietly. The funds are routed through a secondary trust, then redirected into shipping ventures under a separate management entity. All legal, he said. Yes, she agreed. Legal does not always mean transparent. He studied the lines more closely now. His jaw tightened by a fraction. The oversight of these accounts belongs to Harold Whitcomb, he said. He has served my family since my father's time. Claire did not react immediately. The name struck her like a quiet bell. Whitcomb. She had seen it written once in the corner of a letter she had found among her father's papers. Not as a signature. As a reference. She closed the ledger gently. Longevity does not guarantee loyalty, she said. Sebastian's gaze sharpened. You speak from experience. It was not a question. Claire reached into her reticule and withdrew the sealed envelope she had carried since arriving in London. The wax seal was unbroken, though worn at the edges from handling. She placed it on the desk between them. The motion was deliberate. Final. My father invested in a venture connected to one of these subsidiary trusts, she said, her voice calm, but threaded with something deeper. He believed it bore your endorsement. Sebastian's eyes moved from the envelope to her face. And it did not. The venture collapsed within 6 months, she answered. The losses were significant. She did not describe the drawn curtains, the unpaid accounts, the quiet despair that had settled over their modest home like winter frost. She did not need to. The implication hung in the air. Sebastian's voice lowered. You believe Whitcomb misrepresented my involvement. Claire did not nod. She did not accuse. I believe someone benefited from the illusion of your authority, she said. The study felt smaller now, the walls closing in around the weight of realization. Sebastian stepped back from the desk at last, running a hand slowly over the polished surface as though grounding himself. You came to London to confront me. He said. No. Claire corrected softly. I came to understand whether you were the architect or the mask. The distinction was razor thin. His expression shifted, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. Respect. And what have you concluded? He asked. Claire met his eyes steadily. I have concluded that you do not like being deceived. A faint breath escaped him, almost a laugh without humor. No, he said. I do not. Outside the tall windows, afternoon light slanted across the lawn, steady and unyielding. Inside, the balance between them had changed. She was no longer an enigma at a ballroom. She was a witness to a flaw in his foundation. And Sebastian Hale had never tolerated weakness in his house. Not from enemies. Not from allies. Not even from himself. The envelope remained untouched on the desk, its worn seal catching the late afternoon light like a quiet accusation. Sebastian did not reach for it. Not yet. Instead, he walked to the tall window overlooking the drive, hands clasped behind his back, posture immaculate despite the fracture running beneath his composure. If Whitcomb used my name without authority, he said slowly, then he did so with precision. Claire watched him from beside the desk, the ledgers still open between them like evidence in a silent trial. Precision does not absolve intention, she replied. He turned toward her then, not sharply, but with a new awareness. You risk much by bringing this to me, he said. If you are mistaken, you insult a man who has served my family faithfully for decades. Claire met his gaze without flinching. If I am correct, then you have been serving him without realizing it. The words did not echo. They settled. Heavy. Sebastian returned to the desk and finally picked up the envelope. His fingers traced the edge of the seal, but did not break it. What does this contain? He asked. Correspondence, Claire said. References to investment assurances delivered verbally, not in writing. My father trusted them because the venture carried your implied endorsement. A flicker of something crossed Sebastian's face. Not anger. Not disbelief. Recognition of vulnerability. Implied, he repeated. A dangerous word. Claire nodded once. Especially when it is profitable. Silence stretched between them again. Thicker now. Charged with consequence rather than curiosity. The clock on the mantel marked another minute passing. Outside, a carriage rolled up the drive. Sebastian's expression shifted subtly. Controlled. Whitcomb is scheduled to arrive within the hour, he said. Claire's pulse tightened, though her posture did not betray it. You summoned him. I did, he replied. Before you arrived. The admission landed like a carefully placed stone. You suspected, she said. He inclined his head slightly. I noticed discrepancies. Not enough to accuse. Enough to question. Claire allowed herself the faintest exhale. So she had not misjudged him. He had been watching his own foundations long before she stepped into his ballroom. You may leave before he arrives, Sebastian said quietly. Your presence could complicate matters. She held his gaze steadily. My presence is the matter. The answer was not defiant. It was factual. Sebastian studied her as though weighing risk against resolve. If Whitcomb denies involvement, he will attempt to discredit the source, he said. That source is you. Claire folded her gloves in her hands with deliberate calm. Then he will have to do so in front of the man whose name he borrowed. A faint, almost imperceptible shift touched Sebastian's expression. Respect deepened into something steadier. Trust was too strong a word. Alignment was closer. The sound of carriage wheels stopped outside the main entrance. A door closed. Footsteps approached along the corridor beyond the study doors. Sebastian placed the unopened envelope back onto the desk between them, no longer an accusation, but a catalyst. He moved to stand beside Claire rather than opposite her. Not shielding. Not claiming. Standing. Whatever happens, he said quietly, his voice lower than before. Understand this. If my name was used to ruin your father, it will not remain unexamined. Claire looked at him, seeing not the title, not the power, but the man who disliked deception more than scandal. That, she said softly, is all I came to discover. The study doors opened. Harold Whitcomb entered with practiced composure, silver hair immaculate, expression politely attentive. His eyes flicked once to Claire, assessing, dismissing. Then they returned to Sebastian. You wish to see me, your grace? The air shifted. The game had changed. And for the first time since arriving in London, Claire Monroe was no longer standing alone. Harold Whitcomb stepped fully into the study with the calm assurance of a man who had never once expected to be questioned. His silver hair was immaculate, his dark suit cut conservatively, his posture respectful. Without being submissive, he closed the door behind him with quiet precision. "You wish to see me, Your Grace?" he repeated, offering a slight bow. Sebastian did not immediately respond. He remained beside Claire, close enough to signal alignment, distant enough to preserve decorum. The unopened envelope lay between them on the desk like a silent witness. "I have been reviewing several accounts," Sebastian said at last, his voice measured. "Certain structural transfers appear layered." Wickham's expression did not change. "Layered structures protect the estate from volatility," he replied smoothly. "You have always valued caution." Claire watched him carefully. His tone was polished, controlled, not defensive. "Protection is one function," Sebastian said. "Redirection is another." Wickham's eyes flickered briefly toward the ledgers, then toward Claire, as if calculating her presence for the first time. "I was not aware we had company for financial matters," he said. "Miss Monroe has demonstrated a sharp eye for detail," Sebastian replied evenly. Her observations prompted further review. Wickham's gaze settled fully on Claire now. Calm, assessing. "And what observations might those be?" he asked. Claire did not raise her voice. She did not shift her stance. "Certain investment assurances appear to have been verbally reinforced in your correspondence," she said. "Specifically in ventures linked to subsidiary trusts bearing indirect association with His Grace." Whitcomb's brow lifted slightly, not in alarm, but in polite surprise. "Verbal assurances are common in preliminary discussions," he replied. "They are not endorsements." Claire inclined her head, yet the distinction was not clarified to all parties. A pause. A breath. Wickham folded his hands before him. "Are we discussing a particular complaint?" Sebastian picked up the envelope at last and held it between his fingers without breaking the seal. "We are discussing the integrity of my name," he said quietly. The room seemed to narrow by degrees. Wickham's expression remained composed, though something subtle tightened around his eyes. "My loyalty to your family has never wavered," he said. "For 30 years I have managed your interests with diligence." "Loyalty is not under question," Sebastian replied. "Transparency is." Claire felt the shift in temperature, not literal, but perceptible. The conversation was no longer theoretical. It was directional. Wickham glanced once more at her. "And Miss Monroe's involvement?" he asked lightly. "Is she an auditor now?" "She is a beneficiary of clarity," Sebastian answered before Claire could speak. The statement landed with deliberate weight. Wickham's composure did not crack, but it cooled. "If there has been misunderstanding," he said carefully, "I will of course provide documentation." Claire stepped forward half an inch, just enough to reclaim presence. "Documentation after loss is reflection," she said softly. "Documentation before loss is prevention." Wickham's gaze sharpened for the first time. Not anger. Calculation. "You imply intent," he said. "I imply opportunity," she replied. Silence expanded between the three of them, thick and unyielding. Sebastian placed the envelope back onto the desk, unbroken still, but no longer ignored. "You will bring me every record connected to the subsidiary trusts," he said, his tone no longer curious, but resolute. "Every assurance delivered under my name." Wickham inclined his head slowly. "Of course, Your Grace." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Reputation," he added quietly, "is delicate in London." Sebastian's gaze did not waver. "That is precisely why I intend to guard mine." The door closed behind Wickham with measured restraint. The study fell silent once more. Claire exhaled softly, though her composure remained intact. Sebastian looked at her, not as a puzzle now, but as a catalyst. "This will not remain private," he said. Claire met his eyes steadily. Truth rarely does. And for the first time since the ballroom, the power in the room did not belong to title or tradition. It belonged to what would be revealed next. The door closed with a soft, deliberate click, and the echo lingered longer than it should have. Claire remained still, her gaze resting on the polished wood as though she could still see the outline of Harold Whitcomb standing there. Sebastian did not move immediately either. He stood behind his desk, hands braced lightly against its edge, the afternoon light casting sharp lines across his expression. He did not deny it, Claire said quietly. He reframed it. Sebastian's jaw tightened by a fraction. Wickham has always been skilled at reframing. He finally broke the seal on the envelope. The sound of wax giving way was subtle, but it felt decisive. He unfolded the letter slowly, scanning the contents in silence. Claire watched his face rather than the page. She saw the moment recognition replaced uncertainty. A specific phrase, a signature, an implied endorsement written carefully enough to avoid direct liability, yet clear enough to persuade a trusting investor. Sebastian lowered the letter. He referenced my pending support, he said evenly. Support I never formally granted. Claire nodded once. The wording suggests inevitability, that your involvement was assured. Sebastian folded the letter with precise control and set it beside the ledgers. How much did your father lose? The question was not casual. It was measured. Claire inhaled once before answering. Everything that was not already promised elsewhere. She did not elaborate. She did not describe the gradual tightening of resources, the quiet sale of heirlooms, the evenings spent recalculating numbers that refused to balance. She did not need to. Sebastian's gaze softened, not with pity, but with comprehension. You came prepared to confront me, he said. Yes, she answered. And now? She held his eyes steadily. Now I believe you were used. The admission shifted something between them. It was no longer accusation meeting authority. It was alignment meeting consequence. Sebastian walked toward the window again, letter in hand, his reflection faint against the glass. If this becomes public, he said, the damage will not be contained to Whitcomb. It will extend to you, Claire finished. Yes. Silence followed, heavier than before. The estate grounds beyond the window appeared serene, immaculate lawns stretching beneath a pale sky. Order on the surface, complexity underneath. He will attempt to protect himself, Sebastian said finally. By discrediting you. Claire's chin lifted slightly. He will attempt, she agreed. Sebastian turned back to face her fully. I will not allow it. The statement was calm, resolute, stripped of theatrics. Claire studied him carefully. You cannot control every narrative, she said. No, he replied. But I can choose where I stand. The distinction was subtle, powerful. He moved back to the desk and placed the letter atop the open ledger, aligning paper with precision as though restoring order physically could reinforce it strategically. Whitcomb will return tomorrow with documentation, he said. When he does, this will no longer be inquiry. It will be exposure. Claire felt the weight of that word settle into her chest. Exposure did not end quietly in London. It echoed. You may withdraw from this, Sebastian added. Your purpose has already been served. Claire stepped closer, not hesitating this time. The space between them narrowed to less than a foot. My purpose was never revenge, she said softly. It was truth. His gaze held hers. Steady. Searching. Then we pursue it together, he said. Not as command. Not as invitation. As decision. Outside, the sky shifted toward evening, shadows lengthening across the estate. Inside the study, the alliance solidified without ceremony. The next move would not be whispered. It would be deliberate, and neither of them intended to step back. Morning arrived with a clarity that felt almost deliberate. Claire stood at the tall window of Mrs. Abernathy's townhouse on Westbrook Square, the city already awake beneath a pale sky streaked with soft gray. Carriages rolled past at measured intervals, their wheels striking cobblestone in steady rhythm, as if London itself sensed something shifting beneath its polished surface. The previous afternoon lingered in her mind not as memory, but as consequence. An alliance had been formed. Quietly. Intentionally. And alliances in this city were rarely without cost. A folded note rested on the small writing desk behind her, delivered less than an hour earlier by a uniformed footman bearing the Blackthorn crest. The message was brief. Whitcomb would present documentation at noon. Claire had been requested to attend. Requested, not summoned. The distinction mattered. By 11:45, Blackthorn House stood as composed as ever, its stone facade unchanged by the tremor beneath its administration. Claire entered the study once more, the scent of ink and polished with steady and familiar now. Sebastian was already present, reviewing a stack of documents newly delivered. His posture was controlled, but something in his eyes had sharpened overnight. He has provided extensive records, he said without looking up. Transfers, authorizations, correspondence. Claire removed her gloves with deliberate calm. Extensive can obscure, she replied. Sebastian glanced at her briefly. Or reveal. A knock sounded at the door. Harold Whitcomb entered with a leather portfolio tucked beneath his arm. expression impeccably neutral. "Your Grace," he greeted, then inclined his head toward Claire with polite acknowledgement that did not quite conceal scrutiny. "Miss Monroe." He placed the portfolio on the desk and opened it, revealing neatly organized files. "As requested," he said. "Complete transparency." Sebastian gestured toward the desk. "Walk me through the subsidiary trusts," he said evenly. Wickham began with practiced confidence, referencing dates, market fluctuations, strategic insulation against downturn. His voice was steady, authoritative. Claire listened carefully, her eyes tracking the pages rather than the man. It was not the overt transactions that concerned her. It was the phrasing, the assurances. She leaned slightly closer to one particular document, a memorandum referencing projected endorsement. From the Duke, pending final confirmation. The date aligned precisely with the correspondence in her father's letter. "This memorandum," she said quietly. Wickham paused only briefly before responding. "Preliminary language," he explained. "Standard within negotiations." Claire lifted her gaze to meet his. "Preliminary language delivered to investors as certainty becomes leverage," she said calmly. Sebastian did not interrupt. He watched Wickham instead. The older man's composure remained intact, yet a subtle tension had crept into the angle of his shoulders. If an investor misinterpreted optimism as guarantee, Wickham replied smoothly, "That cannot be attributed to misconduct." Sebastian stepped forward now, resting both hands on the desk. "Optimism does not carry my seal," he said quietly. "Yet my name appears in correspondence suggesting inevitability." Silence followed, thicker than before. Wickham's eyes flicked once to Claire. "Are we to base conclusions on the grievance of one failed investor?" he asked. The question was strategic, narrowing. Claire felt the weight of it, but did not retreat. "You are not being questioned for a grievance," she said evenly. "You are being questioned for pattern." The words settled heavily. Pattern implied repetition. System. Intent. Sebastian's gaze never left Wickham's face. "I will review every assurance issued under my authority," he said, his tone final. "Until then, you are relieved of independent management over the subsidiary trusts." It was not shouted. It did not need to be. Wickham's expression did not fracture, but something within it cooled. "As you wish, Your Grace," he said carefully. He gathered his portfolio with controlled precision and inclined his head once more before exiting the study. The door closed softly. Claire exhaled slowly, her composure steady despite the magnitude of what had just occurred. Sebastian turned toward her, the weight of decision visible but unshaken. "This will not end quietly," he said. Claire met his eyes. "Truth rarely does," she replied. And in that quiet study, beneath shelves of ledgers and years of inherited authority, something had irrevocably shifted. Not just power, not just trust. Alignment had deepened into commitment. And London, though unaware, was already moving toward the moment when silence would no longer protect anyone. London did not wait for official statements. By the following evening, whispers had already begun to circulate through drawing rooms and private clubs, carried not by proof but by intuition. Harold Wickham's sudden removal from independent oversight had not gone unnoticed. Carriages paused, longer outside Blackthorn House. Invitations were extended with sharper curiosity. Claire felt the shift the moment she stepped once more into a ballroom, this time not as an anomaly, but as a figure attached to consequence. The chandeliers burned bright above polished floors, yet beneath the music and laughter there was an undercurrent of speculation that pulsed like a second rhythm. Sebastian entered several minutes after she did, composed as ever, dressed in midnight black, his presence drawing immediate attention. Conversations lowered instinctively. Where once admiration had followed him unquestioned, now interest carried an edge. Claire stood near the far side of the room, speaking quietly with Mrs. Abernathy, when the subtle hush announced his approach. He did not reach for her immediately. He did not claim proximity as spectacle. Instead, he addressed the host in full view of the room, his voice steady and deliberate. "I believe transparency is owed," he said clearly enough to carry beyond polite distance. The music faltered. A few fans stilled midair. Madeleine Cross, positioned near the orchestra, turned sharply. Sebastian continued, not raising his voice, yet commanding attention with precision. Recent administrative review within my estate revealed discrepancies in subsidiary trusts managed under my authority. Those trusts are undergoing full audit. The word landed like a bell struck in open air. Audit. Not rumor. Not scandal. Process. Controlled exposure. Claire watched him from across the floor, understanding the weight of what he was doing. He was not allowing the narrative to twist. He was stepping into it. Any investments previously associated with my endorsement will be individually re-examined, he added. Where assurances were misrepresented, restitution will be considered. Murmurs rippled outward. Not outrage. Not disbelief. Surprise. Respect edged with caution. Harold Whitcomb was not present. His absence spoke loudly enough. Madeline moved toward Claire with measured steps, her smile thinner than before. How remarkable, she murmured softly. To see a duke correct his own house. Claire met her gaze calmly. It is rarer to see one who prefers truth to comfort. Madeline's composure flickered. Across the room, Sebastian's eyes found Claire's. There was no triumph in his expression. No performance. Only resolve. He crossed the floor then, not hurried, not hesitant, stopping an appropriate distance from her. Miss Monroe, he said formally, though the familiarity in his tone had deepened. You were correct. It was a public acknowledgement, subtle yet unmistakable. Claire inclined her head slightly. Clarity benefits everyone, she replied. Around them, London watched carefully, recalibrating perception in real time. Sebastian extended his hand once more, not as conquest, not as spectacle, but as partnership. Walk with me, he said quietly. Claire placed her hand in his, steady and unafraid. As they moved through the ballroom together, whispers no longer carried mockery. They carried recalculation. Power had shifted, not through scandal, but through choice. And beneath the glow of chandeliers and the weight of inherited titles, something far more enduring than curiosity had begun to take root. Not fascination. Not strategy. Trust. The music resumed, but it no longer commanded the room. The true gravity had shifted to the space where Sebastian Hale and Claire Monroe stood side by side beneath the chandelier's steady glow. Their joined hands were proper, measured, yet unmistakable. London watched not for scandal now, but for outcome. As they moved across the polished floor, the waltz unfolding in slow, deliberate turns, Claire felt the weight of the past loosened by degrees. Not erased. Acknowledged. Sebastian's hand rested at her waist with formal distance, his posture composed. Yet something in his expression had changed. The sharp calculation that once guarded him had softened into clarity. You could have left after the audit, he said quietly, low enough that only she could hear. You had what you came for. Claire met his gaze steadily. I did not come for apology, she replied. I came for truth. He studied her face as though memorizing the answer. And now that you have it. The question held no assumption, no claim. Claire glanced briefly toward the tall windows where night pressed gently against the glass. Now I decide what to build with it, she said. The dance slowed, the final notes stretching like a held breath. Around them, conversations had resumed, but the tone had shifted. No longer dismissive, no longer mocking, observant, respectful. Sebastian released her hand only when the music fully faded. He did not step away. Blackthorn House will compensate every loss tied to misrepresented endorsement, he said quietly. Your father's estate included. Claire felt the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, not racing, not trembling. Steady. Compensation restores accounts, she said. It does not restore time. He did not look away. No, he agreed. But it restores choice. The word lingered between them. Choice. Something she had fought to. Reclaim the moment she arrived in London. A servant approached discreetly with her shawl. Claire accepted it, drawing the fabric lightly around her shoulders. The ballroom felt warmer now, yet the air between them remained cool with clarity rather than tension. You once told me I should learn to tolerate mystery, Sebastian said quietly. I believe I understand what you meant. A faint smile touched Claire's lips, not triumphant, not coy. Genuine. Mystery forces honesty, she replied. It removes assumption. He inclined his head slightly. Then allow me one final assumption. She raised an eyebrow. You will not leave London immediately. Claire considered him for a moment, the chandeliers reflecting in her eyes like distant constellations. No, she said softly. I will not. It was not a promise. It was possibility. Sebastian offered his arm once more, not as a declaration, but as invitation. Claire placed her hand there without hesitation. Together they walked toward the edge of the ballroom, not hurried, not hidden. Behind them, London recalibrated its narrative. Ahead of them, the future remained unwritten, not by scandal or spectacle, but by deliberate choice. And in the quiet space between power and independence, between title and truth, something enduring had begun to take shape. Not possession, not obligation, partnership.